Good evening. This is Neil, W2NDG from Highland, New York, starting the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Let's pause for any emergency or priority traffic. All right, just turning the power up a little bit here. Okay, so no emergency or priority traffic. And we are here. It's Sunday night at 8 p.m., where we gather to talk about science and technology, not always ham radio related. Tonight it might be, but it doesn't have to be. And I'll get into that in a moment. Let me drop. So this is the first Science and Technology Net of the new year. And I believe number 35 we're up to. So we've done quite a few of these. And I thank everybody for attending. And thank my co-host, Jim, K2BHM, for being here as well. And we're going to see if Jim is here tonight. So Jim, K2BHM, are you around?
I'm here, K2BHM.
All right. Don't know if you saw my last minute email. I hadn't come up with anything, but I had a kind of a vague thing.
Yeah, and along those lines, I was thinking of putting it out there for future possibilities, see if anybody's interested in talking about like photography or welding or metal and woodworking or stuff like that. So maybe we'll mention that and see if there's any interest in that for future nets.
Yeah, perfect. It sounds good. And those things may actually come up tonight. So let me explain what I want to do tonight, and we'll get going with that. So first, I hope everybody had a great New Year's Eve. And my wife created her famous homemade split pea soup tonight from leftover Christmas ham. And wonderful as always. One of the things I always look forward to after the holidays. So the subject I put up on our Facebook group and on the 835 and the 805 page was makers. And it's a really general term these days, but for the kids in high school and beginning college, makers usually implies things like robotics and microcontrollers and things like that. That's not where I wanted to go with it. I want to expand on that a little bit. And basically, when we do check-ins here, I'm going to be asking you, what do you make? And it's hobbies where you create something. And like Jim was saying, you might be into amateur photography, even, developing your own prints, which, some people still do deal with film and prints and such. Maybe you are an amateur chef, amateur pastry chef, baker. It doesn't always have to be something in ham radio. What do I make? Well, besides electronics, and in the picture on the thumbnail for tonight's thing, I was holding up one of my latest creations, the Steven Weber Nor'easter, which is one of the more difficult kits that I've built, all surface mount, which I did all by hand. So yeah, I create electronic things. I haven't created much from scratch. I usually do kits, but part of the things to do on my list is to take a project that isn't a kit and maybe order a circuit board for it after I design it, or do what they call Manhattan construction on a copper clad board. There's a number of ways to go with that, but Yeah, okay. I create electronics. Um, but that's not all I create. I do consider myself to be an amateur chef. Um, I like playing around in the kitchen. I love coming up with new things, um, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy toying around with that. And in addition to that, um, what else? I've done some, you know, things with wood and created things out of wood, but that's very amateur for me. Um, I'd like to get into more of it as I get the garages set up more for doing things like that. And I guess the other thing for me would be music. Not an active musician like a couple of our members are. I don't play all the time, but I still play. And one of the things I've always liked to do with my music is to compose. So, that's the things that I make. Um, and I'm willing to, elaborate on any of those. But let's go over to Jim, and I want Jim to tell me, what does he enjoy building and making? What does he have that he could show somebody and say, I made this?
Wow. Well, the latest thing was the steam engines, and they're on 835 with pictures and so forth, and the Raspberry Pi stuff and so forth. But my whole career has been making stuff. I started with my dad when I was 5 years old. We'd go to a junkyard in Watervliet on Saturday mornings because he knew the guy that owned the place, and look around through the piles and see what was there. And Dad had asked me, what do you think this is, and how do you think it works? And we'd take it home and pull it apart, and if it was interesting, I saw how things worked, and we brought it back the next week. And if it was really interesting, we'd give him $5 or $10, and Dad and I would take the parts and build something out of it. So we've been building stuff since I was 5 years old, and it goes across all disciplines: mechanical, electronics, radio amateur, everything. So it's hard to pick out one thing. Back to you, K2BHM.
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Thanks, Jim. It's exactly what I'm looking for. I started, doing some of this stuff at an early age myself. I built, kits. I learned how to solder when I was a kid, but I stopped. I hadn't done it in years until I got my ham license and started doing it again. And now it seems to be my main thing here. But yeah, there's definitely other things that I've built, other things I've made, other things I've created. My family, has always been like that. I mean, a lot of people who knew my dad never, thought of him as being much of a woodworker or anything like that. But I watched him make furniture for our basement. It wasn't fancy, but it was cool and it worked. And it was exactly what we needed. It was storage furniture, something you could sit on and throw all your toys in quickly when you were told to clean up. I watched him build a boat. What kind of boat? It was like a 2.5 person, stretch skin kayak type of thing from a company called Full Boat. Later on, he got into the folding models, but he built the first one, which wasn't a folding one. Built the framework, stretched the cover over it, glued everything together, and I watched him and my brother put that together in the basement. And unlike Gibbs from NCIS, we were able to get it out of the basement. My brother Lee is a very accomplished mechanic, car restoring, specialist. He has one of his cars wins awards, best in show, everywhere he brings it. But he's one of those people, he can create almost anything in that garage. And I've watched him build models. And when he builds models, they're these special, like ultra detailed miniature things things that you take a magnifying glass and look inside of the car and you can read the lettering on the dashboard, just crazy stuff like that. He fixes watches. He's always been a model builder. I can remember building some model cars and model ships and stuff as a kid, but not like he did. So we all have something, and in some cases, there's something in your home that you can point to and say, "I made that." We even know people who can point to their home itself and say, "I made that." So let's check in tonight, and let's take the check-ins first, and then we'll go around. And I want to know what you make. So check-ins first, though. Come now with your call sign, your name, and your location.
Here is KB2 GGF Matt in Kerhonkson. This is KB2 VAH Jim in Poughkeepsie. Now the rest of you come out of the woodwork. Site control. KD2, Tango Victor Sierra Lou, West Milford, New Jersey. This is WA2 RKN, Jerry, Hyde Park.
All right, that's a good start. We've got Matt, KB2GGF, Kerhonkson, Jim, KB2VAH in Poughkeepsie, Lou, KB2TVS in West Milford, New Jersey, and Jerry, WA2RKN in Hyde Park. Anybody else want to catch up before our first round here? All right, let's take a trip around the horn here and talk about what you like to build, what you like to make, and then Jim and I will discuss some of the things that catch our ears here, and then we'll look for more check-ins at that point. But Matt, KB2GGF, what do you build?
Thanks, Neil. Interesting topic, too. Pardon me. What do I build? What I don't have. If I don't have it, I'll try to build it. And what Jim was saying about starting at an early age reminded me very much of when I was a boy. When I was 5 years old, my father gave me my first real toolkit. They weren't kids' toys. They were real tools. And screwdriver, hammer, tape measure, pair of pliers, as I recall. And I still have the screwdriver. The rest I've lost. But was always interested in how things went together and how they came apart. Let me drop it. Famously, my father had a hi-fi, a Bogan hi-fi amp, if you remember those. And one day, when I got home from school, I guess I was about 7, I decided, how does this thing work? I better take it apart. So I took apart the amp, got the tubes out, and was just starting to unscrew the filament transformer from the chassis when my father came home and said, "What are you doing?" Well, we got it back together and it worked fine, but I've always been interested in how things work. So I've always been working with my hands, and I'm also very curious. So I'm always looking for things that I can improve or modify or change or build. And
I also usually don't have a lot of money to spend, so I look for ways of doing things that are perhaps a little more affordable, because that's what I got to do.
Well, pretty cool. I like the tools. Dad's tools are always everywhere, you know. I think every now and then he'd get upset and we'd look all over the house and make sure they all got back to the workbench. I can't remember my first toolkit. What I do remember, and I made a note here, was shop class. Of course, when I went to junior high, it was kind of that in-between stage where they hadn't started to make the boys and the girls take both shop and home economics, which, of course, home economics name changed to something else later on. But they had opened it up so you could choose which one you wanted to take. And I think the reason why they made it mandatory later on is because a whole bunch of girls chose shop class and like 2 guys chose home economics. But I always liked shop. And one of the things I remember, I swear I have it somewhere, is in plastics shop. When we did the injection molding part of plastics shop, we made screwdrivers. And I still had mine. I don't know what happened to it, but it was this blue-handled, flat blade screwdriver I made in shop class. And a couple other things I made as well that I had for years. I don't think I have them anymore. But yeah, learned how to build stuff there. And I also had a chuckle when you said you took apart the amp. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I took apart a couple of portable, I'd say portable, but record players, the self-contained ones, where you had the turntable with a ceramic cartridge and amplifier and speaker all in one package. And a couple of times took them apart completely and put them back together. They were transistorized though, and started doing the same with radios. But as a really little kid, I had an obsession with record players. Just couldn't get enough of them. So lots of fun. Jim, any comments on Matt's hobbies?
Yeah, I was playing around with Dad's equipment and stuff like that too. Not very often you see a 5 or 6-year-old kid playing around with an ARC 5 Air Force surplus radio that's got a 150-volt DC power supply for the tubes and so forth and so on. And I'm in there taking things apart and replacing this because it went bad or whatever. And I was playing around with Tektronix scopes and fixing them up and so forth. I used to get the Popular Electronics magazine, and I would build articles out of that. And you'd put it together after you finally managed to find the parts from Radio Shack and Lafayette, and we had this other little guy that sold stuff out of his basement, Les Couch, W2HVM. And invariably, when you made something out of the magazine, it didn't work. And you'd have to play around with it and figure out why it didn't work and whatever. Oh, that's a 1K resistor, not a 1 meg resistor. And then a couple months later, you see the oops column, and it was, oh yeah, R13 was supposed to be 1K, not 1 meg. But yeah, it sounds like we've all got similar experiences. So back to you, K2BHM.
Yeah, and you just brought back another memory, which I'll add real quick before we go to Jim. The magazines. I subscribed to Elementary Electronics and Popular Electronics. And Dad always had Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, and something else coming in. And for the science fair at school the one year, I made an optical communication board. It was kind of neat. And I found in those wonderful electronic magazine archives, because all of these magazines are archived online now. And I found the project. It was in elementary electronics. It was called the Lightcom. I made it on 2 wooden blocks. It was a handful of components on each block. And then my father, because he worked in the dental industry, was able to get me a length of image quality fiber optic cable. And so I had a tape player on one side of the table with the block for the transmitter, and I had a little amplifier on the other side of the table with a block for the receiver, and I had a black line down the middle of the table I made with electrical tape showing that there was no connection from the left side of the table to the right, and then I would take the fiber optic cable and show people that it was just light and transmit the music from one side of the table to the other. Now, today, obviously, it's not a big deal. But in, whatever this was, 1974, 75, it was a big deal. People weren't doing this stuff. So, anyway, well, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Jim. And off to Jim, KD2VAH. Jim, what do you like to make?
I don't know how you would call it. I have a background in computer building. I mean, it fascinated me from 88 up. And somewheres, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years back, I totally lost interest. Don't much care, just keep them running. Back then, they were funner. They were, that's a word, funner. I liked computer serial ports. And the reason why is what I'm going to say is because I'm more of a mechanical electronic type guy. I love to hook up switches, speakers, electric eyes, humidifier eyes. I don't even know the words for them, but I know how to use them. I never really played much on circuit boards. I use those breakout boards to play around with, but they're never been a thing with me. It might be a new hobby. Maybe I'll try getting into that. But I'm more into like building a mechanical switch for these microphones. I got the patience and the time to do it as far as, and that part I like, where somebody could turn around and do it on a printed circuit board and probably do it much nicer, much smaller. But I don't know what it's called. I'm more into mechanical electronics. I mean, I was mad when they got rid of serial ports on computers. There went all my switches. Back to that.
That's fine. And, I didn't include computers in the things that I built, but I certainly did enough of them. And it's definitely changed. You can still build computers today. It's different. That hobby has changed a bit, but it's still cases and power supplies and motherboards and cards. It's just different. And I made a couple of notes here. I remember the first computer I built, was a Frankenstein machine. My brother Paul had shipped me a computer from Wisconsin because I told him I was retiring my Amiga. I didn't want to keep going in that direction because the company was floundering and get into PCs. He sent me his old 286, but when it made it to New York, it didn't work anymore. So I used parts of that and the motherboard that someone gave me and some memory that I bought and a video card that I bought, and a hard drive that someone gave me, and I managed to build my first PC out of all that. The rest is history, as they say. But that was, my first venture in that direction. And I go way back with this stuff. I played with Linux when the only 2 distributions out there were Slackware and Yggdrasil, which doesn't exist anymore. It's amazing that Slackware is still around. And I didn't understand what it was. I had never seen Unix before. It was weird, but I forced, myself to keep looking at it and learning, and it was fun. One thing that's really changed in that world is, building computers, like I said, it's different. It was more of a challenge then because we had to deal with things like IRQ conflicts. and making sure we had enough IRQs to run all the various serial and parallel devices that we were using, and getting the sound cards configured correctly, and cursing at those awful sound card modem combo boards, and everything else. Yeah, it was definitely a different time. I know Jim's got some things to say about this. K2BHM.
Oh yeah, lots of memories. I started playing with the VIC-20, and we wound up making a expansion chassis for it and plug in cards, 8K RAM and EEPROM cards. We were copying game cards and so forth and whatever. And then I wound up making an EEPROM burner that would plug in and work on the VIC-20. And then I put an EEPROM on it and wrote a resonant operating system for the EEPROM burner and put it on the burner. So you type in sys 40,000 and up comes this page that operates the EEPROM burner. And then when I got into IBM PCs, I started using that to reprogram the BIOS chips to support hardware that I bought that didn't have the proper selector switch for parameters that I needed. So I actually went in and started modifying the lookup tables for the dip switches that you would set for different hard drives. So, yeah, the good old days. Oh, back to you, K2BHM.
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Thanks, Jim, for commentary, and Jim VAH. I mean, the fact that you still like to put that other stuff together, and there's definitely things out there that you can build. I have to think of some things, but there's some cool projects. Maybe make your own tuner. There's plenty of projects for making manual tuners. It would be pretty cool. I watched as a kid. I watched my uncle, W1PVC, Erwin Bruntill, and he was an RF engineer. And I used to watch him operate in his shack. And when he tuned up, he had this huge tank coil and this giant alligator clip. It looked like a jumper cable. And he would move it on the coil and use that to tune up his rig. He had one of those super high power Halicrafters transceivers. I don't know if it was the Hurricane or not, but it put out a lot of juice. And he was an interesting guy. But, everything except the transceiver had been built by him. If you look in the patent searches, you'll find his name in there. He designed some stuff for RCA, and I think possibly, I can't think of the name now, the company that ended up owning Halicrafters. That's actually how he ended up with the Halicrafters radios. All right, let me drop. I know it's taken a while to get to everybody, but Lou, KD2 TVS, what do you like to build?
Good evening, Neil. Well, I hope you got a lot of time because I've done quite a bit. But as you know, I came from an aviation background. So and you spoke, I think last week or and that you were originally out from Long Island, like Steve. So when I went to high school, I went to aviation high school in Queens, New York. So my first job out of there, let me just go back. When you get trained as an aviation mechanic, then you're basically into so many types of systems that you get to. You can go into engines, electrical, hydraulic, pneumatics, water, sheet metal, wood, dope, and fabric, the whole thing. So you kind of learn how to build things from scratch. In fact, in high school, we built a wing bay, which was a wing section out of wood and fabric, like the old Stearman airplanes were back in Wright Brothers and all that stuff. So you get to learn all that stuff. So that was one portion of the things that I built. I built an aileron made out of sheet metal from scratch, and these were all things that we were supposed to be trained to do. So if we ever repairer. And like I said, you talked about being Long Island. I was actually working on Long Island once I got out of high school, working for out in Farmingdale for Fairchild Republic, built in the 810. So that was a lot of my sheet metal experience came from before I went into the airlines and started doing that. But I built things and actually love tinkering and repairing things or modifying things. I've modified generators to run on propane instead of gasoline, so you wouldn't have to stand at the gas line if you were out of power, like back during the Sandy days, and trying to hunt down fuel. So I said I was never going to do that again, so I modified my generator. And I mean, I've done. Let me just reset. Yeah, I've had a few older cars, and I've modified electrical systems in them from their alternator generators and wiring and stuff. So it's all part of the same field. So I've always tried to find a better way of something working and modifying it to that. So it's kind of funny. You guys were talking photography. I was into as a teenager also. So I did my own black and white. I never did color per se, developing and stuff, but I did have my own enlarger. And my first camera was a Yashica SLR 35 millimeters. So I did shoot quite a bit of black and white back in the day, and developed it myself and made prints and the whole thing. Back when my wife and I first met, so I was always taking pictures of her, you know. Electronics wise, I've built computers too. I remember my first computer, like the name was mentioned, was the VIC 20, and I had a Commodore 64, and I had a Gateway, and I had an IBM. When IBM first went into personal computers, I had one of those back in the, I guess it was in the early 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And after that, I started building a few of my own clones. I remember playing with DOS before Windows was ever around, and when that came out, the original Windows, I remember that came out. I didn't really like it. I was so used to DOS that it took a little bit before I got used to Windows, which is actually kind of good because when my son was growing up, and with me, he was quite young, so as I built the computers, I taught him about DOS and everything, and execute commands and COM and all that stuff, and he got it. It's funny that he later on when he did some college and he went into the Air Force, and he got into he was a communications in the Air Force, so basically I guess a network administrator in the civilian world. So he was always all into that. Was in there about 10 years almost, playing with computers. So it kind of worked out, well, at least that portion of it. I started him off in a career field that he liked. So that was nice. But yeah, like I said, let me just reset. I've always loved to there's always trying to figure out how things work. So I mean, I've taken transmissions out of washing machines in the old days and replaced them, fixed dryers when the electrical dryers were out, troubleshooting and figuring out what was wrong with it, done all kinds of crazy things like that. So I'm more of a tinkerer than I am of a maker, but yeah, a couple of things. I made some wood furniture too. I just thought about that. I mean, there was a couple of I was part of a group in here in Jersey, and they did reenactments, not Civil War, but earlier from the, what was it, from just that, let me see, I guess it was 1730s to the 1830s or something like that. So they did a lot of camping and reenactments in some of the state parks here in Jersey. Let me reset. And I got to learn how to put up teepees and canvas tents and deal with black powder firearms, into archery and fire starting. So I had to learn all those little bits of survival skills from those guys. So it's always always curious, just needing to know about something. My wife was just, what do you know that? I never know when one day I may need it. So, so let me just rest that one for a while and listen to the rest of you guys and see if I think of anything else. Back to you, Neil. KD2TVS.
Oh, thanks, Lou. And there's a lot of cool stuff there. And for anybody watching on YouTube, the furry thing here is Olive, the smarter of the two cats. So, and if you've seen me leaning over or talking to something, if you're watching on video here, that's her. And she finally jumped up in my lap here while I was talking. I guess you could say that's another hobby. Aviation. And, when you talk about Long Island, there was so much innovation that was centered on that area. And getting involved with ham radio, you got to meet a lot of these guys who some of them were pioneers in some of the technology. But, you had Grumman, it's a huge presence there for years, and Motorola. There's a lot of research on the island and so much history that connects back into radio. So definitely cool. And you reminded me of a quick story. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. One of my ham radio friends, long retired, very talented engineer, worked for Grumman, among other places in his history. And he told me this story. He said that one of the funniest things that ever happened when he was working there was when they were testing low altitude parachutes, I guess. And they were doing some practice jumps on the property, and they had a lot of land there. And one of the engineers who was actually jumping and testing this stuff out got very upset when somebody had accidentally given him the wrong type of chute. And when he realized that he was descending way too fast, he aimed for the water, figuring a little more cushion would help. And it was just a pond, nothing really deep. And Bob said that when they wrote up the incident report and explained that things were not done correctly and there was an injury, the only injury turned out to be a turtle bite. That the guy who landed in the water got bit by a snapping turtle. So we dropped. My late brother Paul was into photography when I was a kid, and I remember he had all the darkroom equipment and all black and white. He used to do his own prints, and it was a lot of fun to watch him work. And he actually got involved with something called Junior Achievement, which I don't even know if that organization exists anymore, but he was teaching photography through there. And I remember there was a mishap where whatever school or organization was hosting the classes got broken into, and a lot of his equipment got stolen. So, but he was into that for years, and then he got into movie making when he was in first year of college, and made some films as part of his project for school. I wish I knew where they were. I always wanted to transfer them to video. They were interesting, like artsy films. One of them quite funny. So anyway, that's cool. Jim, any comments on aviation and photography and the such for Lou?
Well, K2BHM here. Photography, I started off 5 years old, 1960, with a Brownie box camera. Took 120 roll film, and Dad and I would darken up the kitchen at night and develop it out, and an enlarger and so forth. And over the years, we got into doing more elaborate things. I still got my dad's 4x5 speed graphic. That was the camera you see in men using in the movies from the 40s. The actual film was 4 inches by 5 inches. And I got into color. Had a Vivitar, I still got it, but Vivitar enlarger with the color head on it, color analyzer. And when the color analyzer went bad and stopped working, I went and rebuilt it and made it solid state and made it a lot more accurate. I made up a constant temperature water bath because your developer had to be at 95 degrees plus or minus about a half a degree. So I made up a water bath to keep all my chemistry at the right temperature and kind of way into it. Then I got into making printed circuit boards. You could design something in a program on DOS, and it would put out a pattern on your dot matrix printer of the foil. And then, let me drop a second. I've got a circa 1890s studio portrait camera that takes an 8x10 film. And so I would take a 1-to-1 of the artwork coming out of the printer, and I would make up a high contrast negative and sensitize the PC board and expose it and develop it and etch it. And if I had all new chemistry made up so I didn't have to deal with that, I could be from the printer to the drill press in, like an hour and a half or so, making my own PC boards. That was fun. But nowadays, nobody does it anymore. You send a file off someplace for $5 or $10, and back comes a board later on. So much for that. But it was fun while it lasted. Did some silk screen printing too. I also tried silk screening the patterns, and that worked well too. So, yeah, did a lot of playing around with photography in the past, and now it's all digital. So, anyhow, back to you. Give everybody else a chance. K2BHM.
Comment.
Go ahead, comment.
You're going to hate me, but I need Jim's wisdom on this. What is the track thing that looks like a tank that's driven by a motorcycle? World War II. Germans had it. Please tell me the name of it, Jim. I know this has nothing to do with science and technology, but curiosity is killing me.
Drawing a blank on the one that's half motorcycle. I know they put tracks on the back of trucks and stuff like that. They call them half tracks. They had regular wheels in the front and then tracks in the back for propulsion. But drawing a blank on the motorcycle combo.
Not to change the subject here, but earlier today I watched a World War II movie, and it's killing me on how you could even steer something like that. That's kind of science and technology. You can't steer it with a motorcycle front end.
Comment, KB2GGF.
Go ahead, Matt.
Jim, VAH. I forget the name of it. It's a compound German word. They all are. But it was used primarily for moving around airplanes to, move them in the hangars and get them out on the runway like that. Back to net.
It's like track it, riding squirrel and squasher.
Has 2 tracks on the back. Looks like some, I guess, prototype ATV, but the front is motorcycle. I mean, the front end is a motorcycle, and I'm like, there's no way. Anyway, I was kind of hoping Jim would know.
That's all right. Interesting diversion there. Definitely cool stuff. Yeah, Jim, circuit boards. Just to get back on track. I'm in the process of following a project that is finally at its completion. They've published the full designs of everything in the bill of materials. and basically because most of it is surface mount with this radio that I've been following the project on. You just order the board with all the parts already populated, so you can take it even that much further. It's crazy, but it's definitely the way to do it. In the thumbnail for tonight's discussion, like I said, I'm holding up one that I did. And less people are actually doing this, but this board, and for those of you watching, I'm going to hold it up to the camera again here. I did this one by hand, and definitely required some serious magnification. That's what I'll say. But it was fun, and it works. All right, Jerry, sorry to take so long to get to you. WA2RKN, what do you like to build?
WA2RKN. Well, I like to build a lot of things. What I actually build is another story. I like building kits, always have, because all the work has been done to you. Where does the screw go? Well, the hole's already been drilled, and circuit boards have already been etched, and all you got to do is stuff the holes and solder them. It's like putting together kit furniture, bookshelves or whatever. Always enjoyed that. Built a frequency standard back in high school, QSD around 1968. Used a handful of ICs, very new thing at the time. 7490s, I remember, and CI and Motorola, I think it was MC 845s or whatever. But basically, digital divider chain off a crystal oscillator, laid out, etched PC board, double side board, no through holes. And I never understood why people thought double-sided boards were so problematic. I just used 10 to the inch grid paper, laid out both sides, different color pencil, rubber cement to the board, drill holes, all like that. Rolls of sticky tape for like drafting, for layout. Use that directly on the board. Boy, is that a pain to make one-off boards. Degraded from that to using the magic marker pens directly on the board, and etch that way with a ferric fluoride. Put the die-cast box, primed it with the zinc chromate. Come to find out, I used the wrong color zinc chromate, but whatever. Put a nice enamel finish on it. The wax rub-on markers for the labeling. Sprayed it with the clear coat lacquer stuff. Those Tesla coils, pair of 811As. On the coil, approximately 20 inches long, 2 inches in diameter, number 32 wire. So, set up a little jig with an auto transformer driving a drill. Chuck the bobbin, one end in, 2-inch PVC, not PVC, plexiglass. Set up a little jig to hold it. Another wire to hold the spool, and I'm the man in the middle, controlling the rheostat and the alignment of the wire. Let me tell you, without the mechanical assist, wouldn't have been done. So that was fun. Built Timex Sinclair from the kit. It was an American kit version. Microwaves. Had fun with that. Added expanded memory. Added external keyboard. Yada yada yada. Built a workbench. Picked up an old desktop, wooden desktop, standard size. size, and all I got was the desk top, about an inch and a half thick. Cobbled together 2x4s, glued them together, make 4x4s for the legs, which I attached to the sheet goods. Unfortunately, I used particle board rather than plywood, cost, etc. Not knowing better at the time, but it's still doing the job. So basically, built the side supports, built the back for it, built the top for it. So I had book storage up on the top, built the backstop for the books on the top. So I had front and back storage. Installed lighting, fluorescent strip above, painted the inside, covered the desktop with linoleum. So at a work area. Computers, yeah. Built a CPM system from scratch. Bare board, surplus Xerox 820 boards. Picked them up, scrounged the parts up, stuffed the board, soldered it up, bought a copy of CPM, a couple of 8-inch disk drives. Bob's your uncle. Had CPM up and running. And let's see. From there, we transitioned to running a version of a bulletin board on the Xerox 820 over the radio. Packet radio had been born on the scene, and so I had a couple of ports. Had the bulletin board up. 2 ports actually, one for traffic and one for playing around and trying things. Following that, I had an Amiga. Hey there, Neil. Amiga. Had the Amiga 2000. Had a full TCP/IP stack. There was something called Amiga NOS, and I put that on the radio. At the time, I think I had like a 100 meg disk, which was fairly big at the time, and all kinds of files for frequencies and what frequency, who was using this frequency, was it local fire, all that kind of stuff. So files were available, and the other side, the CPM stuff was pumping the mail back and forth, up and down a chain of PBSs up and down the East Coast for mail forwarding. Let's see, what else? Built an EEPROM burner kit, from a kit to upgrade the TNC2s for packet stuff. Also changed the Xerox 820 proms to EEPROMs, so I could change the clock speed on the boards. A little bit of tweaking there. And yes, Lou, you know what's coming up eventually. I mentioned last time. I built, I'm building a balsa stick-built glider, not completed. Has been an ongoing project for longer than I'll admit to. Anyway, I have a PulseJet engine here. Ogawa Model Manufacturing Company Limited, OGAWA Model Manufacturing Company, Osaka, Japan. Now this baby has been around for a while, so I'm not sure you'll find current information about it. It's called Super OS Jet, PulseJet. And as I mentioned last time, this has been gathering dust in my hands for too many decades. And I horse traded it with someone else for a Swan 500 transceiver because it was gathering dust in his hands. So in order to get the dust off of this stuff, I'm proposing a group kind of a thing. It would need, somebody who's familiar with metalworking and somebody who's familiar with flying, and there are many skills that would be needed. I'm just proposing to throw the PulseJet to the group, make it a group loan to the group project kind of thing, and see what happens. So there it is. WA2RKN, back to that.
Thanks, Jerry. W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday night Science and Technology Net. A lot of interesting stuff there. And the cat is back in my lap, and she seems very interested in the hand that's holding the microphone. God, all that stuff. When you mentioned CPM, I started thinking about Gary Kildall, and did a little quick searching here on the computer, for different ways to explain, but the page came up is the day Gary Kildall went flying, which is a legend that may not be entirely true, because there are some people at IBM who claim that the reason why they didn't go with CPM was because Kildall's wife refused to sign a non-disclosure. So either way, that's how we ended up with MS-DOS. So it was either that Gary blew off a meeting with IBM and went flying in his airplane, or his wife didn't like the idea of signing a non-disclosure. But one way or the other, that's how CPM died and MS-DOS lived. Some say unfortunately, but it would have been an interesting world without Microsoft now. All of this stuff, and when you say some sort of group effort, I'm thinking we definitely have some really talented fabricators in the group. And my cat here that's climbing all over me while some of you are watching seems to be a tool and hardware expert. She's always stealing tools and hardware from me. But let me see if Jim has any comments on all of Jerry's stuff there. I heard the EEPROM burner for the second time tonight. How many times do you hear that twice?
Yeah, mine was definitely homebrew. They were large laboratory devices back then. Nothing whatsoever that would plug into the expansion slot of the VIC-20. So mine was designed, fabricated, and programmed all in-house. And Jim, I think I found what you're looking for. Kettenkrad, Kettenkrad. It's a tracked vehicle with a motorcycle wheel in the front. World War II from Germany, basically from the 40s. And the question is how the heck do you steer something like that? Well, I found that there is a diagram of the linkage. When you turn the fork one way or the other to turn the front wheel, there's also linkage that applies brakes to one side of the track or the other to aid in the turning. So that's how they do it. Never saw one of those before. Neat. Anyhow, yeah, back to you. I don't want to take up too much time and give everybody else a chance. K2BHM.
No, that's fine. And let's see if there's anybody else who wants to check in real quick, and we'll ask them the same question. I don't know if we're going to do a full round 2 here tonight. It's just because this subject does take a while. All right, the cat is trying to get between the microphone and my mouth. What is going on here? She never does this. So strange. This is Neil on the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club's Sunday night Science and Technology Net with my co-host Olive the cat. Now there she goes. Is there anybody else who would like to check in tonight and tell us what they like to make and build? Please come now. All right, that's fine. It was a good discussion, though. And there's certainly a lot of stuff about this and like this. And, I think if you take the average amateur radio club, you have a pool of expertise and experts and the ability to do all sorts of things. And I remember this always reminds me of something. And I don't know how many people remember this, but a decade ago or so, maybe a little longer, there was a show on TV called Junkyard Wars. Very entertaining. I was always sorry that it didn't go further, but I guess you can kind of run out of material for a show like that. But the reason I bring it up is that when you have a group of people with a mix of talents that can come together and do things, it's interesting to look at something like a team for a show like that. And something my brother always talked about was that he wanted to put together a team for Junkyard Wars, and he had like the ultimate group of people because each one of them was good at something. And I wish they had done it. I think that would have been fantastic. I'd love to see them do something like that. So, but yeah, the show isn't around anymore. But there's definitely, cases where you can take a handful of people and put them to a task, and you have experts. I stumbled on a room at work maybe about 7 or 8 years ago when I was asked to deliver a hard drive to somebody. And I had never heard the name or been to the room that they asked me to bring it to before. And I referred to it as the Mad Scientist Group. And it was 3 guys in a room in another building near me. And it was a mechanical engineer, a computer engineer, and a software expert. And the cat is climbing on me again. Now she's trying to groom my head. What is going on? Basically what they did was they designed experiments for the research labs where I work. So someone would come up with and say, we need a microscope that does this and interacts with the outside world with this. And they would build it. They would build it mechanically. They would build the computer portion of it, and the software guy would write the software that made it work. And I need to put the cat on the floor because there's oh my God. Jim, comment please.
Yeah, I remember Junkyard Wars. That was cool. They did get creative, and it's kind of funny because you sit back and you're watching here, and it's like, well, they had that over there. Why didn't they use that? And they could have taken this and put it with that, and they wouldn't have had to do all of the other work, and so forth and so on. So it was fun Monday night quarterback on that show. Anyhow, Cat got your tongue?
Kind of like the other way around. I don't know why she felt I needed to be groomed. This used to happen when she was a kid, and I've never seen her do this. Usually it means that the food bowl is empty or the water dish is empty, but I know neither of those are the case. For the one time I followed her when she was doing this stuff, she led me to the fire, which was going out, wanted me to put wood on the fire. She loves the fire. I don't know what's going on tonight. She is an interesting cat. Anyway, for those of you listening tonight, if you skip to this point in the video, which is right around 1 hour even, you'll see her climb up again and start grooming me. So strange. Anyway, all right. Open season here. Throw comments out. Say anything. We'll go for a little while longer, but I want to try to get to bed. Tomorrow is going to be an interesting day. I am going to go into the city. I have to find out more about my medical situation and find out when I'm going to be tying all that up. So tomorrow might be my only day in the city tomorrow. We'll see. I'm going to try to limit my exposure before I have to get all this done, because it would be really unfortunate to have to delay it because I came down with COVID. Although I wouldn't expect that I would get really sick because I've got the 3 shots in me, but it's still rather unfortunate if I have to delay things in order to get over it. So One night I think we will probably have a talk about cancer and cancer research. I think it's time. Might be a good discussion. But all right, anybody else have anything they want to add to the discussion tonight? And it's just throw your call sign out, and we'll do that for a few minutes, and then I think I'll close things up.
W2GIO.
Right, that was a double. I had to check in W2GIO. Oh, I've been sitting here so long that my mouse went to sleep. All right, and there was definitely a double there.
Could be way too arcane.
All right, and that was Jerry who has a comment or something more to say. W2GIO, I think that's the call sign you gave me. Looked you up on QRZ. Is you're from Fishkill?
You got it, Frank and Fishkill. Frankie Fingers.
All right, Frank. Well, welcome to the Overlook Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I don't know if you've been listening or know what the subject is tonight, but we've been asking people, what do they make? What do they build?
Yeah, I've been listening. And I'm going to kind of throw a little twist in this just because I like to give a plug for something that goes on in the Hudson Valley. And when you talk about making stuff, I'm kind of into making stuff work, broken stuff. And so we have what's called a repair cafe movement. And it's usually set up in a community center or a church basement. And on a Saturday morning from 10 to 2, we invite people to bring their broken stuff in and fix it. And it's all kinds of stuff. We have fixers from all different disciplines: wood, jewelry, fabric, electronics, electrical stuff. And it's a really fun opportunity to be surprised by what comes in the door. And if you look up Hudson Valley Repair Cafe, you'll see a schedule of the events. I think we got one coming up on the 15th, but it's going to be down in Yorktown. Indoors, by the way. And I've done about 40 of these already. And they actually do them on Zoom, and they're international. And talking about fun, when you have 30 or 40 fixers from all different parts of the world, and you have people bringing stuff in from God only knows from where, and we're trying to help them figure out how to fix it. So it's kind of neat. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents for tonight. W2GIO.
Thanks, Frank. And yeah, okay. It's like, I know you. We've discussed this before, as a matter of fact. And actually, I remember thinking that this is something that Jim K2BHM might enjoy. Jim, do you want to comment?
I've heard about them, but I've never actually been to one. It would be interesting because how do you know what tools to bring because you have no clue what you're going to be working on and get parts and stuff like that. I'm kind of curious a little more detail on how they actually work and how they actually accomplish what they're doing.
Okay, I can spend about 5 minutes answering that if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. You explain a little more about it, and I guess give us and Jim specifically some information on. I know you gave the website, but how to get involved. I know we've talked about it before, and Jim, before I let Frank go here, I for some reason I just had this picture of Kenny wheeling a washing machine into this.
You're bad. Poor guy waits 6 months for his appliances, and 4 out of 5 are bad. That's my type of luck.
So, Frank, please elaborate. I'm actually going to get up out of my chair for about 30 seconds here and grab some water.
Okay, go on with the discussion then. Let me know what's going on with the repair clinics.
Okay, the biggest item that we ever get is the humidifiers, and but that's that's not too usual. Microwaves, we've gotten big screen TVs. Now, I usually do more of the electronics and electrical stuff. There's a lot of lamps come in, so lamps are pretty easy, and most of the repair cafes have lamp parts. And in fact, some of the stores like Home Depot will actually donate some parts for that kind of stuff. As far as tools, I have a good collection of tools that I keep in my car. I have a little Prius station wagon, and I have a pretty good collection of tools. And so does most people that do these repair cafes, because once you come to one, the other thing you know is that you know who has what tools. So if you don't have a tool, there's going to be 4 or 5 other people with tools, and you just go over there and you just ask for a particular tool, and you know who's got a good collection. Like one guy's got these real long screwdrivers, and sometimes you got something that the screws are buried down deep, or they got these, what you call it, the security bits. Well, I got a whole set of security bit screwdrivers. So anyhow, we end up getting to know who has what, and then the other thing it's a good excuse to get new tools, because after all, you're doing something good with them. They're not just sitting around getting rusty. And so how you get involved? Well, you go look at the schedule on Hudson Valley Repair Cafe, and if you see one, like I say, there's one on the 15th, and if you're interested in going, you can contact, there'll be a name or a phone number of a person that's involved, and you say, hey, I'm going to come, I'm a fixer. And you can bring a multimeter and, just some basic tools, and then, when you get there, you may sit next to or with another person that's a fixer, and next thing you know, you're working on it together. So I usually, I have different people that show up, and next thing you know, I had a nurse last time, and she works on brains, right? And so she knows all about Ohm's law, current sources, voltage sources, all that stuff. I said, okay, you're going to work with me. So next thing you know, we're working on an old vacuum tube radio and a sewing machine, and she's having a good time. So there you go. Let me drop it. You can look up Hudson. You can look up NBC News Repair Cafe on YouTube, and there's a video that was done at probably about 6 years ago in New Paltz at the Methodist Church, and NBC News came up, and they did there's 2 videos. One's a short one, the other one's 3 minutes. Look at the 3-minute one, and you'll see it. You get a good idea what the spirit is. We have them in LaGrange, Poughkeepsie, Red Hook, Rhinebeck, Woodstock, Rosendale, Sopus. Like I say, there's about 40 locations in the Hudson Valley where these events take place. Now they're slowly coming back to in person, which, before the COVID, we were doing them all in person. And right now, the only place that is doing it in person is down in Yorktown. And there's I think 2 locations. One's a community center and the other one's a church. In fact, the pastor of the church is a pretty good guy for fixing stuff, and he's got a multimeter, and he's working fixing stuff too. So, it's a really neat opportunity to meet up with different kinds of people, and you never know what you're going to end up fixing. In fact, sometimes I take stuff home, and I'll fix it and then bring it back next time. So it's cool. So that's the long and short of it. And as far as parts go, sometimes a guy brought in a Sony boombox, and he plugged it in his car backwards, so he blew out the audio chip. So I said, well, if we can get the audio chip out without killing the board, you can order one and bring it next time. And exactly that's what happened. So we managed to get the chip out. He went and ordered it from DigiKey, and 2 months later or 3 months later, he brought it back. We put the IC in, and he went home with a working boombox. So there you go. And everybody lives happily ever after. W2GIL.
Frank, thanks for all that. Jim, I'm looking at the calendar here. I mean, there's one coming up in New Paltz, and then the weekend after, there's one in Kingston. So it sounds kind of interesting. I may want to get involved, but I think I have to wait till after I get through this work that I have to have done. So, but yeah, we've talked about that before, and I wouldn't mind getting involved myself. I didn't realize there was one so close to me. Cool stuff. Jim, you want to comment?
Yeah, it brings back lots of memories. Years ago, I used to do a lot of servicing of radios and TVs and stuff like that for friends and family, and parts was a big deal because I would have to get a ride over to Trojan Electronics or Radio Shack or Lafayette or something like that to try and get the parts, and then they didn't have them, and you had to order them or whatever, and then later on as things progressed, eventually Radio Shack or Lafayette went out of business, and then Radio Shack went. All the electronic stores are gone now. Trojan Electronics, I used to work for them in Troy. They shut down permanently about 3 years ago. So getting parts is very difficult, and service manuals are non-existent now, so you're kind of on your own. So I was kind of curious as to how you get around that. Not necessarily an easy thing, tracking things down. They put in-house part numbers on stuff and so forth and so on, and most of the stuff nowadays is designed not to be fixed. So it's kind of, I'm just kind of wondering how they go about doing it. It's got to be very simple stuff that you can get parts in a hardware store or something like that in order to pull it off.
Well, what I do is a lot of electronic stuff. When you notice probably that the electrolytic capacitors are a big culprit, and I did one repair cafe in Newburgh, and a microwave oven came in, and also a big screen TV. And the microwave oven, all it needed was a new fuse inside, of course, and the TV had a couple of bad electrolytics on the circuit board. And so what I do is I have a bunch of circuit boards from copy machines, and on those circuit boards there's a lot of good components, and they probably put better components. And then I have a really good ESR meter to measure capacitors. So if I put a capacitor in, it's basically a repurposed one from a device. And same thing with transistors. If I get to that point where I need to replace a transistor, that could happen, and I usually have some number of those components with me. And it's pretty generic in a lot of cases. So, but yeah, the capacitors are a big culprit. And what else? Yeah, sometimes switches. I just worked on a blender, and it had a high-low switch on it. And the woman that brought it in, I says, well, this switch is bad, and we're not going to be able to replace the switch. And I says, well, the person, I guess it was her daughter, she says, yeah, my daughter always uses it on high. So I said, you know what, we're going to just wire it on high. And it still had some speed control, but the actual high-low switch, we just jumpered it out. So that's how some of the fixes take place.
All right. Well, Frank, thank you. And you're welcome to stop by here on Sunday nights, whenever, or any of our other nets if you want to pop in on the 8:35 morning net, the 6:30 evening net, and announce when you have one coming up. You might find some people who want to get involved. But thanks for coming by, and appreciate the information. We also Jerry threw out his call when I was calling for further check-ins or comments. Jerry, WA2RKN.
No, and you can't read a part number. It's like, okay, what do you do now?
Jim, I think we doubled.
Really good for this stuff. You'd be surprised how many things you can fix by just going to YouTube and looking up model number, and that kind of thing.
Gotta get the net under control
sure
again.
enough, there's usually, it's amazing what people put on YouTube, and they're very good. That's helped a lot. The other thing we find is we always check to see if the item was recalled for any reason, and because sometimes that's the case. One of the guys was working on a vacuum cleaner, battery operated, and the control transistor that feeds power to the motor came unsoldered, and it turns out that the transistor was running so hot that it became unsoldered. So what happened is Morty, I said, "So take it home and call the manufacturer." And so he did, and he said, "Well, this thing is getting so hot it's liable to catch fire." That's all he needed to say. They said, "Okay, don't do anything with it. We'll send you a brand new one."
Okay, the magic trigger word.
Hey guys, I doubled actually with Jim before, but I had cut in real quick because I did want to make sure we catch Jerry before we end the net here because he would have a comment as well. But let me make sure I'm actually getting out here now. Frank, you're welcome to come by and chat about this whenever. And what I would recommend is when you have one of these coming up, please check into our 8:35 a.m. net or 6:30 p.m. net, which happen every day, and announce that you have one coming up. And you're looking for both fixers and fixees. I have no problem promoting something like this, but I do want to get back on track with the net here. But thank you. Thanks very much. Any final comments from either of you? And then I want to make sure Jerry, who had a comment, gets his moment here.
Yeah, I just want to. Yeah, one of the things is we had a repair cafe down in Peekskill, and usually when you have the first one, you try to get a number of organizations sponsoring it. At least that's what we did in Peekskill because I was part of Peekskill Toastmasters. So we had the Chamber of the Peekskill Toastmasters, the library where the event was held, the town of Peekskill, and some other green organization. And also the Peekskill Cortland Amateur Radio Club was a co-sponsor. And so there's if you go on to YouTube, you'll see Peekskill Repair Cafe, and you'll see there was a cable channel that was doing some video interviews, and that gave the club an opportunity to promote the Peekskill Amateur Radio Club. And you can bring a banner if you have one. So I'm going to do that with Mount Beacon. I have a Mount Beacon banner that I'm going to bring down to Yorktown. So just for fun, and have an HT on the table and people ask questions. So yeah, you can. That's the other comment is that a club can get some recognition that way by being a co-sponsor. Don't cost anything. It just says we're going to show up and help.
Yeah, that's cool, and we definitely want to, stick with something like this. So, all right, it sounds interesting. Well, crazy times to be doing in some ways, but hopefully things will get a little more back to normal. But once again, Frank, thanks, and please let us know. I know I'll keep checking the calendar myself, but you're welcome to pop in and let us know when there's one coming up. Jerry, WA2RKN, you had a comment.
WA2RKN. Harkening back to Junkyard Wars, they went off the air, and I was not happy with that. It got a little bit strained toward the end, but I think there was still life in the show. And there was one challenge that I would have liked to have seen that never did appear, and that would have been whoever can flash cook a frozen turkey first by a lightning strike. And Frank, nice to see you show up here. those of you who don't know, W2GIO is very technically knowledgeable and good material for chat. Often comes up. WA2RK, back to that.
Thanks, Jerry. I was going to ask Frank if he ever had anybody bring in a small pulse jet engine. I know the last time we were talking about this, I was talking to him on the air, and we were talking about toasters, I think. But yeah, it's almost anything. And I've certainly fixed enough stuff myself. I have spent countless hours upside down on the floor underneath my washing machine over the years. Of course, the ones I have now have warranties, but when necessity is the mother of invention, and I think that's where Matt was heading with a lot of his comments earlier. All right. Does anybody else have any comments or things they want to add for tonight's Science and Technology Net, or any late last-minute check-ins?
82 TVS with a comment.
All right, I've got Lou with a comment. Anybody else or any check-ins? All right, Lou, go ahead.
Thank you, Neil. Surprised Jerry didn't think about cooking that turkey with the pulse jet engine of his, with the exhaust coming out the back of that. And I think it was Frank, right? The guy with the repair cafe. I think I met him up last year at a Mount Beacon radio. I'm a member of that club up there. So I went for one meeting up there during the summer, and he was talking about that. It's probably the same Frank that I heard up there. So that's interesting. I like that. Like I said, I like tinkering with stuff, so I'm game for it. And Jerry, I'm game for your pulse jet. I saw a manual online. I guess somebody's selling or was selling one on eBay. So I see what it looks like and everything. So I think that'll be interesting if you got the airplane to put that in. So I'm definitely game for that. So back to you, Neil. KD2TVS.
Thanks, Lou. And yeah, I think this could get pretty dangerous. Something really interesting. Jerry, I never caught that one with the turkey. That's crazy. I like that idea, though. I remember one of my favorites was where they had to create an amphibious vehicle and had to drive a certain amount of distance on land and a certain amount of distance in the water, and then back to land again. It had to go, it had to be able to go from land to water back to land, not just one way. It's always been one of my favorites. I think the only other thing that I found as entertaining over the years, and as far as just watching mechanical things like that on television, was one of the earlier episodes of, oh God, no, I can't think of the name of the show, but the one that had so much controversy and then had to come back under a different name, British automotive show, where the challenge was that each of the hosts, the three of them, had to make limousines in a very limited amount of time, functioning limousines. And wow, just some really crazy stuff came out of that. Top Gear. Thanks. I must be tired. All right. Let's close things up here. Any last comments from my co-host, Jim, K2BHM?
Yeah, thanks. Probably the most interesting one I did was a group project. Back years ago, I was working for the federal government, Waterbury Arsenal, and sitting at my desk one afternoon, and my dad calls and says that my son Jimmy and he are working on a project and they need a hand, come out after work and we'll throw some burgers on the grill and we will work on the project. My dad, Grandpa, and Jimmy were making a light bulb. Actually, physically making a light bulb. So when I got out there, Dad didn't have the manual dexterity. Jimmy didn't have the manual dexterity to spot weld the filament on, and Dad didn't have the eyesight. So we wound up making up a new filament out of tungsten, heating it up with the torch and a spiral, wrapping it around a mandrel, spot welding it to a Pyrex lead through. And Dad took a Pyrex test tube and made the glass envelope for it, and we put it on a vacuum system and pumped it down and sealed it off, and made a 12-volt light bulb that worked off a 12-volt CV power supply. And Jimmy took it to school for show and tell in 3rd grade. So you never know what you're going to get into. K2BHM.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I've definitely, as we say in the family, MacGyvered a few things together to try to get things fixed and to come up with a temporary tool for the job. There's certainly plenty of stories between me and my brother and my family and all the different things that we've had to do over the years. And some of this leads into practical jokes, of course. And, of course, some of the engineering schools are home of some of the best practical joke stories. And that's stuff for another night. Those of us who get into engineering and subjects like this always have one or more good practical joke stories. Maybe that'll be a topic for a future net. All right, I'm going to close things up here. Let me drop. I'm looking for the cat, see if she wants to say goodbye. Stop bothering me. This has been the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club's Sunday night Science and Technology Net on the repeater of the OMARC Club, 146.805 megahertz with a negative shift and a PL tone of 103.5 hertz. We are here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. talking about science and technology, not always ham radio related. All are welcome. You do not need to be a member of our club. But if you are interested in becoming a member of our club or want more information, you can find us at omarcclub.org, omarcclub.org. Please join us for the other nets that occur on this frequency and related frequencies. Now, every morning at 8:35 a.m., we have the 8:35 on the 805, a roundtable-style casual net that started at the beginning of the pandemic to try to keep us social and make sure that everybody was okay, hosted by a rotating cast of OMARC characters. Every night at 6:30, we have the 6:30 check-in net, a directed net but still casual, similar in theme to the morning net, hosted by a rotating cast of OMARCians again. Every Monday, we have the Ulster and Northern Duchess Readiness Net, a group of hams getting ready to prepare, to be prepared for emergencies and call to duty. The net talks about different ways of making sure that we're ready in an emergency and alternative ways of communicating when our usual ways of communicating fail. We're not currently affiliated with any emergency or service organization, but are looking to have that happen. And that net is getting us ready for that instance. Every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. is the new Hudson Valley 80-meter net, hosted by Paul, AC2UQ, and sometimes guest hosted. I think Kenny K2KRP is going to be doing one upcoming net, but Paul is the founder of that net and usually hosts it. It's 4:30 on 3.935 or 3935 kilohertz. give or take 5 or 10 kilohertz if the frequency is occupied, but that's 4:30 p.m. on Wednesdays. Every Thursday at 8 p.m., our club president, Dave, K2GLV, hosts the Thursday Night Technical Net. That is a more ham radio-oriented technical net, but sometimes covers the subjects of computers and Raspberry Pi and other related things. Once again, this has been Neil, W2NDG from Highland, and my co-host Jim, K2BHM from Saugerties, hosting the Overlook Mountain Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We now return this repeater to its regular amateur radio use. I'm going to end the YouTube stream now, and we hope to see everybody back here at 8 p.m. next Sunday. Thank you for coming by. 7-3. Have a good night.